So now we need to digitize lines. So we've loaded an empty line data set and we've activated the editor and selected, or will select, the line as our target set of features. And you'll notice you get a set of tools, construction tools in the bottom that will set as line. Then you get a set of editing tools. So here we're going to add a single line segment, clicking the vertices as we go along and double clicking to end. So I'll start where I want a road to begin and click along, placing a vertex at each bend in the road. Now I'm doing a fairly coarse density. For really careful digitizing, you'd want to do a much higher density than that. Also notice that you can zoom actively using the magnifying glasses, or you can pan and zoom using a scroll wheel or using the edges of the window here, and it doesn't mess up your digitizing. Sometimes it'll leave a stray line as it shows here, but that's just an artifact of the paint. There isn't actually a real line there. Now I can set snapping to aid in my digitizing, but you have to be careful. There's two kinds of snapping, and the primary snapping allows you to set points to snap to or features to snap to, but only the end one works for lines. And the tolerance is here in pixels, and you might think that would be image pixels, but that's not the case. It's in screen pixels. So I might look at this and say, oh, I have a 1 meter distance. So if I set the tolerance to 1 or 2 meters in the snapping, it should snap within 1 or 2 meters, but that doesn't actually happen. And so you'll see here as we move along and go to click to the edge, the snapping doesn't occur until we get very, very close. It does become sticky, but my snap distance is a little small. So if you use the sort of normal or main snapping, you often have to trial and error to set the snap tolerance. So it's 5 pixels, and with 1 meter data, it should be 5 meters, but that's not the case. Here I move it way up to 20 and say I still don't get any change to the snapping. The snapping really only works for the endpoint, and I trial and error to get a distance that makes sense for the system that I have. And here you see the snapping to the endpoint working quite well, certainly not at 100 meters, but pulling then the point in so that I have good connections on my lines. Now I want to go ahead and get rid of these. I can left click on them to select them with the caret tool. So here's the caret tool, and I'll left click on select, and then if I right click over them, I can open a menu that will allow me to select delete the features, and so there they go away. Now there's an alternative kind of snapping called classic snapping that's found in the options toolbar. So I'll go down and left click on the feature and then go down to the bottom and select its properties, and I can set classic snapping on. Then I can set options, and in this case I can set the options to real map units. It's one of the reasons I prefer classic snapping, is because then I know how much I'm snapping the data back and forth or moving them. I'm setting them to 5 meters here, and then I can manage my data quality better because it goes through the units. And now you see as I get close, oops, it doesn't seem to work. I have to set up classic snapping to say what's going to snap to what. I do that in the snapping window. So here I go and open this snapping window. It's kind of confusing because there are options in various places for classic snapping. And so now I'm going to say that I want to snap to vertices here, and you can see then it gets pulled at full 5 meters. So you have to make sure that you set the classic snapping and then set the classic snapping options. Now I can set it to snap to an edge. It's not doing that yet. It's just snapping to vertices. But I can go ahead and set multiple options in this classic snapping and continue. Now zooming out, you can see then that where I've digitized, I have some errors. So I didn't have snapping turned on. I can use the caret tool, and I can left click on a feature, and then I can either double left click or right click over it. If I left click, hold, and drag on a point, I can pull a vertex back. So what I have to do is make sure that I either double left click and see that little green dot, or I can left click and then right click and say edit the vertices on the line. I'll do it again. So double left click, you see those little green dots show up, those are the vertices. If I right click over the line, I can add a vertex, and then if I hold my cursor over the line, see how the vertex is indicated by a different shape in the cursor. It gets that little block with triangles around it, which means that's active. Then I can hold and drag. Now here in the snapping window, I set the snapping tolerance pretty high when I was digitizing, but sometimes I want to move things a shorter distance, so I can go back into classic snapping and change that tolerance. Again, holding over the top until it changes, then clicking and dragging, I can move that feature. But remember, I can't move the feature any shorter distance than my snapping tolerance. So if I want to recenter this line and my snapping tolerance is set too high, I might have to reset my snapping tolerance low. Or sometimes you can drag stuff way out and drag it back. If you accidentally grab and move an entire line segment, you can always go to Edit and Undo Move. Sometimes you're trying to grab a vertex and you misgrab and you pull the whole line segment. So that Edit, Undo, Move is very useful, or just edit, undo your last step to keep you from having to redo a bunch of digitizing. Remember to save, and when you're done, stop editing.